right. They do have a film festival. I think I've been 3 times now. I was a guest of honor about 4 or 5 years ago. But I think it was my repeated trips to that extraordinary, beautiful town that encouraged and made me think one day I shall make a film here.
That was the reason. No, the city is quite beautiful, and just walking around the streets, it's so charming. And the underground way, I adore go and see the people waiting for the bus.
That's right.
In the underground, it's like quite, it's not usual, but in somehow there is usual.
The place always feels rather dangerous because it's spooky, but actually, housewives going to the supermarket are quite happy and feel quite safe to sit down there. Sometimes there's a lot of traffic; it's incredibly noisy and sort of rings in your ears. But it's very big, isn't it? I mean, I think they say there's 20 miles of roads underneath the ground. Some of them are quite obscure now and very badly lit and hardly used anymore. And sometimes there's a flash flood and all the water rushes all the way through the city. It's very surreal. You come across all sorts of strange happenings. When I was there, I think 5 years ago, I actually came across a baby elephant. There was a circus in town, and they stabled the elephant underground, and it was very surreal. Very interesting. I think I was there first in the springtime when all the blossom was out, and that was extraordinary. We had to film, I think, at the other end of the year. I think we filmed, probably just before Christmas, so all the blossom had gone, or still too soon. But nonetheless, even without that, it's an extraordinary place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I have one first question that I will have to ask you is, I saw an interview about you that you say that one of the worst things that can happen is that movies are made by Disney now, because you cannot talk about sex and death. And I'm asking myself after watching this movie, which has a lot of those subjects, and I think they are very common subjects in Mexican culture. How do you feel about, those concepts?
Well, you're a Roman Catholic country, which is a problem that originally puts you in the past. As we said before, the Reformation left Roman Catholics stranded behind times and fossilized. But there are ways and means out there that the Protestant notion about sex and death are just as bad, in a sense, as the Roman Catholic ones. But there's a very forgiving nature, if a somewhat fakery, about Roman Catholicism. You can simply go to a priest and ask your sins to be forgiven, and hey presto. So there's no sense of responsibility, which always seems to be not really part of the human condition. But the Roman Catholic traditions, of course, although I laugh at that superstition, are extraordinarily rich and very exciting mythology. I've been an atheist ever since I was about 13, but I always used to get, top marks in Bible studies, and so I know all this material extremely well. But I think you have to, if you're trained as a painter, and if you're interested in painting history, you have to know what all these painters are painting about. I live in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is Rembrandt's city. And he painted something like 500 paintings, and about 400 of them come out of the Old Testament. So you need to know where the subject matter came from.
Okay, thank you. And
what do you think about our picture of Mexico? Have I been another Eurocentric, playing fun with Mexicans? I mean, we parody it. Those crazy characters that look like bandits, though I often think they look as though they come out of a Tolkien novel as well with their funny hats. We parodied that a bit, but I think we've done it affectionately.
Yeah, but I think they have some of the, the characteristic of Que Viva Mexico.
Yeah.
In the Russia, in the war,
Yep.
during the war, the revolution, they look the same hat, the same style. Yep. So I thought it was part of the concept.
Yeah, there's something very romantic about it. Yes. Terrible poverty, of course, and enormous amounts of ignorance and huge amounts of violence we're all terrified about. But I always found that to be an extraordinary contradiction. There's all this violence in Mexico. I saw some really terrible things. But the people themselves, I have to probably include you as well, are so generous, are so warm, are so welcoming. And it's something I certainly felt, and I know that Ensestein did too.
I think that's why he tried to make a movie there. Yeah. That was the first time I knew that he did a movie in Mexico. I thought, but the guy's from Russia. Yeah. And it took me a lot of years to find it, because it's quite hard to find it even in Mexico now. So it's a shame. Yeah.
But I go, maybe even if we start making movies about it, it'll become more and more familiar. People will know. When I first began studying Ensestein, when I was a film student in London, probably in the 1960s, when I said Ensestein, people said, "Pardon me, don't you mean Einstein?" No, there's terrible confusion about those two names. But it's getting better, because our film culture is becoming more and more open. You know, basically you can go down the street here and you can buy any film from the world, can't you? You can now find it on DVD in some way. And even the obscure films, you know, people like Claire Denis, if you try very, very hard, you can normally find them.
And that was around my second question. It's like, we are students in film school, so we would like
Here?
to know...
Yes.
In front of, actually,
Yeah.
the building in front of. And we would like to know, what is your opinion about film schools? And
Well, I understood that film schools are not connected to art schools, are they?
no,
And I think that's a tragedy, because I don't think that anybody should be allowed to pick up a camera until you've studied painting for 3 years, because most film directors are not looking, are not seeing, are not trained, are not visually literate. And I do feel you ought to become visually literate before you take responsibility of making a film. But I say this is true about, you know, most of the world's film directors. Most of the world's film directors know nothing about painting, which is a tragedy. We've had 25,000 years of painting. We've only had 120 years of filmmaking. There's almost no comparison. So I would say, in answer to your question, you must have a contemporary media college or film school that has a background in the whole business of seeing and looking, which surely has to mean painting.
thank you, sir.
My pleasure.